My husband and I DNA tested our grandchildren without permission because they didn't look like family. Now our daughter has gone no contact. I honestly never thought I would be posting here, but my husband says I need to hear opinions from people who aren't emotionally involved, because our family has been completely torn apart over something that, in my opinion, has been blown wildly out of proportion. My daughter Emily, 36F, and her husband Ryan, 38M, have cut all contact with my husband and me. We haven't seen our grandchildren in almost 11 months. We are blocked on everything. Our Christmas gifts were returned unopened. They moved several months ago and refused to provide us with their new address. All because we wanted certainty. I am 62 years old. My husband Frank is 64. We have one child, Emily. Before people jump to conclusions, let me say that Frank and I love our daughter very much. We sacrificed enormously for her growing up. We gave her every opportunity. We simply wanted what was best for her, although she has always interpreted our concern as criticism. Emily has always been extremely sensitive. For example, when she was 16, I suggested she might want to lose 15 pounds before prom because photographs last forever. She cried for days and accused me of calling her fat. I never called her fat. I merely pointed out that she carried weight differently than some of her cousins. Likewise, when she announced she wanted to major in art history, I strongly encouraged her to choose something more practical. She still insists I never supported her dreams, despite the fact that we paid for 4 years of college. This pattern continued throughout adulthood. When she got engaged to Ryan, I simply offered suggestions for the wedding. Every mother does. I suggested she wear my veil instead of the modern one she'd chosen, because family traditions matter. I recommended inviting several family friends she'd left off the guest list because excluding people is rude. I asked her to reconsider the outdoor venue because rain would ruin photographs. Apparently this was controlling. At one point she actually told me, "Mom, you don't get a vote." I was deeply hurt. Still, we moved past it. Things became somewhat strained after she married Ryan. Ryan is polite enough, but he has always seemed uncomfortable around us. I've often wondered if Emily exaggerated stories about her childhood, because from the beginning he treated us as though we were difficult. For instance, when Emily was pregnant with their first child, I naturally wanted to be involved. I attended nearly every doctor's appointment until she asked me not to. I was shocked. I said, "I'm the grandmother." She replied, "You're not the parent." I thought that was unnecessarily harsh. Then, when she went into labor, she refused to let us into the delivery room. Again, her choice, but I won't pretend it didn't hurt. When our first grandson Oliver was born, things improved for a while. Frank and I babysat frequently, although Emily had an annoying habit of creating endless rules. No sugar. No screen time. Specific nap schedules. No posting photos online. Frank used to joke that raising children must have become much more complicated in the last 30 years. Emily would become upset if we deviated even slightly. Once I posted a photograph of Oliver on Facebook after his first haircut because he looked adorable. Emily demanded I remove it immediately because she didn't want her children online. I complied, although I still think parents today are overly paranoid. The real problems started several years later. Emily and Ryan now have 3 children, Oliver 10, Sophie 8 and Luke 6. Oliver strongly resembles Ryan. No one disputes that. But Sophie has bright red hair. Not auburn. Not strawberry blonde. Bright red. Neither Emily nor Ryan has red hair. No one in our immediate family has red hair. Frank and I both have dark hair. Emily has dark brown hair. Ryan has brown hair. The red hair always struck me as unusual. At first I ignored it. Genetics can be strange. Then Luke was born. Luke looks absolutely nothing like anyone on either side of the family. And I do mean nothing. He has different facial features, different colouring, different everything. Multiple people noticed. Not just us. At Sophie's 4th birthday party, my sister quietly remarked, "Where on earth did that red hair come from?" At church, one of my friends said Luke looked exactly like Ryan's friend Daniel. I laughed at the time, but afterward I couldn't stop thinking about it. Daniel and Ryan have been close since college. He's practically family. He attends every holiday, every birthday party, every major event. I want to stress that I never believed Emily would intentionally betray her marriage. But people make mistakes. And frankly, modern society is full of infidelity. Anyone in our position would have had questions. I mentioned my concerns privately to Frank. He immediately told me not to say anything. Linda, he said, you're imagining things. But over time, even Frank started noticing. We began comparing photographs. I know that sounds strange, but grandparents naturally look for family resemblance. I pulled out old albums. I compared baby pictures of Emily, Ryan, cousins, grandparents, aunts and uncles. Nothing. Luke resembled none of us. I even created a small photo collage on my computer to compare facial features side by side. Purely out of curiosity. Frank initially laughed at me, but eventually he admitted, I don't see our family in him either. That comment stayed with me. Over the next 2 years, the concerns grew. Not because we wanted them to. Because little things kept happening. At family gatherings, relatives would innocently say things like, Sophie certainly didn't get that hair from this side. Or Luke is such a mystery. Even neighbours occasionally commented. Emily became defensive whenever resemblance was discussed. Frankly, her defensiveness seemed suspicious. One Thanksgiving, I casually asked where Ryan's family tree came from genetically. Emily snapped, why are you obsessed with this? I said, I'm just curious. She rolled her eyes and said, Mom, drop it. Another time, while babysitting, I asked Oliver whether Uncle Daniel visited often when Daddy was at work. Emily somehow found out and became furious. She accused me of interrogating her children. I said I was making conversation. She said, you're implying I'm cheating on my husband. I told her she was overreacting. Because she was. If there was nothing to hide, why become so upset? Things deteriorated after that. Emily repeatedly told us to stop commenting on the children's appearances. We honestly tried. But then Sophie started asking questions herself. At age 7 she asked, Grandma, why do you always say I don't look like the family? I was surprised she'd noticed. I simply told her. Families come in all shapes and colours, sweetheart. Emily was livid. She said, stop making my children feel like outsiders. I reminded her that children deserve to know their heritage. She hung up on me. Frank and I discussed the situation for months. Eventually, we reached the same conclusion. We needed certainty. Not because we wanted drama. Because family secrets destroy families. Parents don't own children. These were our grandchildren too. We deserved answers. Besides, DNA tests are just science. If Emily had nothing to hide, the tests would only confirm what she had been saying all along. Last summer, Emily and Ryan asked us to watch the children for an entire weekend while they attended a wedding. We agreed. While the children were staying with us, I mentioned that Grandma had planned a fun family ancestry project. The children were excited. Kids love science. I purchased one of those at-home ancestry kits. We swabbed all 3 children. They thought it was a game. Frank and I submitted the samples along with our own. I see no reason we should have needed permission. Grandparents have rights where grandchildren are concerned. We weren't performing surgery. We were learning about family history. Several weeks later, the results arrived. Everything was exactly as expected. All 3 children were biologically related to both Emily and Ryan. No surprises. No hidden secrets. I admit I felt somewhat embarrassed. Frank said, well, at least now we know. And honestly, I felt relieved. The issue was settled permanently. I thought Emily would feel relieved too. I truly did. A month later, during Sunday dinner, I casually mentioned it. I said, "You'll be happy to know the ancestry results came back exactly as expected." Emily looked confused. "What ancestry results?" I smiled. "The DNA kits we did with the kids." Silence. Absolute silence. Ryan slowly set down his fork. Emily said very quietly, "What DNA kits?" I explained. I expected gratitude. Instead, Emily went completely white. Ryan said, "You tested our children." I laughed nervously. "Not tested, it was genealogy." Emily stood up. "You took my children's DNA without our permission." I said, "Please don't make this dramatic." Ryan asked why. I hesitated. Frank said because people had questions. Emily stared. "What questions?" I finally told her. About Sophie not resembling us. About Luke looking different. About Daniel's. I wanted honesty. I thought honesty would help. Instead, Emily began shaking. Ryan looked as though he might actually throw us out physically. Emily said, "You thought I cheated on my husband." I said, "We only wanted peace of mind." Ryan shouted, "Peace of mind from what? Your own daughter's imaginary affair." I replied, "If there was nothing to hide, why be upset now that we've proven everything?" That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Emily started crying. Not normal crying. Sobbing. She said, "You've been doing this for years." I didn't understand. Then she unloaded everything. Everything. She told us she'd known for years that people were gossiping. Apparently, multiple relatives had warned her. Church friends had approached her privately asking strange questions. One neighbor asked if Luke was adopted. Someone else asked whether Daniel was part of the family in more ways than one. I was horrified. I had discussed my concerns with several close friends over the years, but only because I needed advice. I never intended gossip. Emily continued. She said the children had heard comments repeatedly. Oliver once asked Ryan why Grandma said Luke wasn't a real Thompson. I honestly don't remember saying that. Perhaps something similar. Certainly not in a malicious way. Sophie had apparently cried because she thought we didn't love her as much due to her hair color. Again, that was never our intention. Emily said, "You have spent my entire adult life treating me like an irresponsible child who can't be trusted." She listed examples. Showing up unannounced after each birth. Sharing private pregnancy complications with church members. Criticizing breastfeeding. Criticizing formula. Criticizing daycare. Criticizing homeschooling. Criticizing public school. Reading private journals when she lived at home. Demanding house keys. Entering their home without permission. I honestly don't see what most of that had to do with this issue. Parents worry. That's normal. Then Ryan spoke. I'd never heard him sound like that. He said, "You violated our children. You collected their genetic information because you believed your daughter was a liar and a cheater." I said, "That's unfair." Emily said, "No. What's unfair is spending my entire life trying to earn trust from parents who never intended to give it." Then she said something that still hurts. "This isn't about DNA. It's about finally accepting that you will never respect us." They left immediately. The next morning we discovered we'd been blocked. Everywhere. Phone. Emails. Social media. Everything. At first I assumed they'd calm down. Instead, matters became worse. Several relatives sided with Emily. My own sister called me unhinged. One cousin said we'd committed a massive ethical violation. Church friends became distant after hearing the full story. Apparently, Emily told people exactly what happened. Ryan informed us through email that all future communication must go through attorneys. Attorneys. As if we're criminals. We sent apology letters. Emily returned them unopened. though admittedly, our letters mostly explained why we had acted as we did. I still think context matters. Birthdays passed. No invitations. Christmas came. No grandchildren. We mailed gifts. They were returned. 8 months ago, Emily sent one final message. It said, "Our children will not be exposed to people who question their legitimacy, violate their privacy, gossip about their parents, and refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing. Do not contact us again." That was it. Last month we learned through a distant relative that they moved. No one will tell us where. Apparently, the children no longer even talk about us. Frank is devastated. He says we should have simply trusted Emily. Perhaps. But trust doesn't mean ignoring obvious questions. Anyone in our position would have wondered. We only wanted certainty. We proved she had nothing to hide. I genuinely cannot understand why that deserves losing our entire family.